So you've just died. Listen, it happens to the best of us. Not me, of course. I would never die. But after respawning, for whatever reason, you decide it's not safe to jump back in, so you've got to swim back from spawn. But which direction should you go? A couple weeks ago, I talked about the idea of splitting maps up into checkpoints and how you can use those checkpoints as a way of understanding how much space your team has control of and how far into the map you can go based on that control. Now I want to tie that in specifically to respawn pathing. I see this all the time where a player off respawn will either just roll back out into mid on the straightest possible path, or they have a specific defensive position in mind, but by the time they get there, it's no longer safe to take that position. Splatoon is an insanely fast-paced game, and a lot can happen in the amount of time that it takes for you to respawn and then swim all the way back in. Maybe the enemies are able to push up further than you thought, and now you're swimming straight into a fight with no backup. And because of S3's map design, there's a lot of strong positions that are much harder for you to get back to once you've left them. Usually because of one-way drops, or drops that have like one really inconvenient slow way to get back up to them. So when you're choosing your route off respawn, you need to consider if that route makes you lose the opportunity to take certain positions if the situation changes in an unexpected way. So let's take a look at Robo Ramen as an example, and since every weapon's positioning is going to be a little bit different, I'm going to start by just talking about Splat Dualies, which is my main, but understand that this concept is absolutely transferable to every other weapon in the game. You just need to look at positions that are specifically strong for your weapon in particular. So coming off respawn as a Splat Dualie, in situations where I can't just jump straight back in, I'm often going to be trying to get a Crab Tank for retake, because Splat Dualie paints well enough that it can farm Crab relatively quickly, and Crab is really good for helping clear out key positions from a safe distance. If you want more information about how I make that kind of decision versus just taking fights, let me know in the comments, and then subscribe so that you can see it if I make it. So let's say that this is one of those situations where I do want to use a Crab, and my team is trying to hold down that choke over there, but based on the enemies having numbers advantage, it's pretty likely that we'll have to give that space up. But there's a chance that we might be able to clutch up and hold it, especially in solo queue. You never know how capable your teammates are going to be. So in order to help clear out this choke, these are some spots that I might potentially use a Crab, and I'd choose from these positions based on how far up the enemies are and my teammates' positioning. If the enemies are already coming up on this stage here, I'm probably not going to want to use a Crab Tank there because it's likely to get cancelled, or I would just die. If nothing changes and my teammates are able to hold this choke for more than a few seconds, I might be able to get my Crab Tank in one of these further up positions. But because I'm not sure how that engagement's going to turn out, instead of just dropping here and beelining it from one of those positions, I'm actually going to take this path up here towards the right. Once I get here, I can decide whether the situation still calls for me dropping and using my Crab Tank down here, or if things have changed and I would be better off just using my Crab Tank from this position up here. Maybe by the time I get here it is still safe to drop, but if it isn't, I haven't given up the opportunity to use my Crab up here. If I needed to, I even could start with my Crab up here, and then drop it down to the stage once I've pushed the enemies a little bit further back with the Crab. Here's another example. You are a backline player on Hagglefish Market. These are some common positions that you might want to stand on retake as a backline. This is a one-way drop, but you are able to get back up here by using this sponge. It is just pretty inconvenient to have to paint that and then get all the way back up here if you do need to retreat from enemies. You also don't have a lot of visibility for what's going on ramp from all the way back here, which is where enemies are going to be pushing in from if they are coming to get you. So instead of dropping down this way, let's start by just dropping down onto this ledge. And this is already a position that we might want to stand anyway. Once we've gotten here, we also have more visibility for what's going on this ramp in the case that there are enemies trying to come up here and get us. And once you get to this little corner, glass is close enough and you should have enough information that you should know whether or not it's going to be safe for you to drop down here. And in situations where it's not safe, that's when you can decide whether to stay here or switch over to this top left side. The time difference between getting to glass by dropping this way versus just going straight down here is quite small, but the time that you can potentially save yourself by staying high ground for longer instead of having to potentially double back in the future is notable. Yes, it is a tiny difference, but this game is so fast that those tiny differences add up. This doesn't mean that you can never take the straightest path. There are many circumstances where you do need to book it to your teammates in order to support whatever's going on, and sometimes it's obvious that it's perfectly safe to do so. You just need to evaluate the situation and weigh your odds for how things are likely to turn out in the amount of time that it takes for you to swim to that position, which you can use those checkpoints that I talk about in this video for helping figure that out. Hello, Editing Wraith here to add that this is also a position that you can take on retake with a lot of backlines, and that it's also easy to incorporate into this pathing. But it's also a position that you're probably going to know pretty quickly that you need to take because it means that the enemies are pushed pretty far up. A lot of understanding how much space enemies are likely to take in a certain period of time really does just come down to having played the game a lot and developing this internal timer. But that's a much longer term improvement goal. What you can quickly and easily fix is taking a route out of spawn that gives you more options for what you can do once you do have more information about what the situation is. So for your weapon, look for positions that you like to use for retake, see if any of those positions are less accessible once you've passed them, and see if there's a way that you can connect the path between those points to increase the amount of time that they remain an easy option. If this was helpful, tell me in the comments and subscribe, and if it wasn't helpful, tell me in the comments and leave me a big thumbs down. Okay, that's it, bye.